Welcome to Making Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is May 22nd, 2024, and today I'm interviewing Phil Stanton, Director of Sports Communications. Welcome, Phil.
Lynda, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and education, and lead us to how you came to Randolph-Macon.
Well, I grew up in a small town named Chillicothe, Ohio, which is about 45 miles due south of Columbus. Went undergrad in grad school at Ohio State, and was in the statistics department there. And I had an uncle who had taught at Salisbury, and he always told me, he taught math at Salisbury, always told me how great a teaching profession was. And I never liked talking in front of groups. But then when I was in grad school, I was a graduate assistant in the statistics department and really enjoyed that. So that got me thinking about looking at potential schools to be able to teach. So Randolph-Macon had an opening, and I had applied. That would have been in the winter of 1979. Didn't hear anything, and they actually had hired somebody else for the position, and that person, his wife got ill, and so he declined the opportunity. And so I was contacted in May of 79, and they asked me to come over for an interview. I met with Ron Moore and the staff in the math department, and loved the school when I first came and visited. And so then it worked out. So then I came on board in the fall of 1979 as an assistant professor in the math department.
Mm-hmm. Teaching statistics.
Yes, primarily statistics. Yeah. Taught some calculus, some of the other ones, but I was kind of the statistics guy. So I taught usually would have 3 intro-level statistics courses, and then every other year they offered an upper level probability and statistics course for math majors. So I had those, but then also would have, I think I taught finite math one semester and calculus a couple times, but primarily was statistics.
Well, there's a big demand for statistics now. I'm an advisor because of the business major. Well, a lot of majors actually require statistics now, so it's a big demand.
It is. The sociology, psychology, really almost any of the sciences are going to have some statistics involved with them.
Well, so you mentioned Ron Moore. Who else was in the math department at that time?
The 3 kind of the old guard were Ron Moore, Austin Bishop, and Bob Offenbacher. And then when I came in 1979, there was actually 3 new members that came in, Bill Emerson and Chet Gibson. Chet was an alum who came back to teach. So there was 6 of us in the department, 3 that had been there a while, and then 3 new ones.
Very good. Well, I know the names, Moore, Bishop, and Offenbacher for sure. I'm not as familiar with the other 2. So
yeah, they were not here as long.
Yeah, the other were long-timers, right. Well, it was while you were here teaching that you first took on the role of in sports information, right? Yeah,
it is.
Tell us
yes.
about that.
I always had grown up with a real love for sports. So when I came here, young right out of school, had a lot of energy. I was lucky with the intro statistics classes. We used the same textbook all 5 years that I was here to teach. So once I had my notes set that first year, I'd do some slight adjustments semester to semester, but the basics were right there. So I had a lot of free time. So I got to know some of the folks in the athletic department, and started doing public address for games. I ended up becoming the faculty representative for the athletic department. But at that time, they had sports information director just as a part-time position. In 79-80, that was the sesquicentennial for the college. So Jim Jump he had a half-time position as director of the sesquicentennial activities, and then the other half was as sports information director. And then the second year, 80-81, Mike Donovan was assistant basketball coach, men's basketball coach, and he was sports information director. So after those 2 years, Mike left after that year, so they had asked me if I would consider doing it. And that was kind of a shift. The first year that I was teaching, the college had passed a rule that you had to have a PhD to get tenure. And when I got out of college, I was very happy to be done with classes and just was not excited about the thought of going back to work on PhD. So I knew I was going to be limited in how long that I could teach. And so at that time, you could teach a total of 7 years, but they would make a decision after 5. So I kind of knew that the 5 years was going to be my window for teaching, but I kind of got bit by the athletic bug and had a whole lot of fun doing the sports information work.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, I'm glad to have some timeline on that, because I know for a long time there were tenured people with masters and that kind of thing. So
Yep.
when you came, it was under sort of one rule, but then the
they
rules changed. I guess.
Well, coming in, I knew
Oh, you
that's
knew
what
that
it
coming
was.
in,
Yes,
yeah.
so coming in, starting in the fall of '79, any faculty that came in then, they had to have their PhD.
to go through tenure, and of course now we have different levels
Yes.
of faculty that we didn't have at that time.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good. So, you mentioned Mike Donovan, who was assistant basketball coach. You want to talk about some of the coaches and staff people during the time in those early years? I think would love to hear some of those stories. The athletic director and
it was a really fun group of coaches. They got along really well, supported each other really well, and at that time, a lot of the coaches coached multiple sports. A lot of them that were coaching in the fall also did something in the spring. So when I came on board, Hugh Stevens was the baseball coach and the athletic director. A really, really interesting man. He was quiet, but he demanded excellence from his players, and he didn't have to yell at them, but if he would just give them a stern look, that got the point across to him. He was one that was really strived for the players to perform fundamentally, just, be able to field ground balls, pitchers throw strikes. So he just was really, really big on those small details, that all the players take care of those. A very effective leader as athletic director of the department. A lot of different personalities, but even as athletic director, he kind of had that calm demeanor to him that things weren't going to rattle him. So I was really fortunate that I got to spend 2 years with him. He retired in 1981, and then he did stay on part-time as an assistant baseball coach, so he still stayed involved for a few years. Ted Keller was the football coach when I came in. He was one little more fiery than Coach Stevens. Had a lot of success, and even then it was Ted had played here in the early 50s. Had a lot of contacts with former players who had played with him and then those that he coached. So there was a real good sense of community with the alums, kind of that network with the alumni. And then in 1981, Ted ended up taking over as athletic director. So he retired as football coach, and then Jim Blackburn, who had been an assistant, ended up taking over as head coach. And Ted was one that, in talking about coaches doing multiple jobs, he also was the golf coach. And then Jim Blackburn was also the men's lacrosse coach early on. And then Jim really was similar, kind of kept the program going the way that Ted had it going. The ODAC formed in 1976, and so the that was really the primary goal, is you wanted to win ODAC titles. And then while Coach Blackburn was leading the program in 1984, they ended up winning the ODAC with a 9-1 record and made the playoffs for the first time. So that, I think, was a really big step for the program to be able to not only be relevant in the state, in the region, but now it was, bursting back onto the scene as a national power. Men's basketball, Hal Nunley was the head coach. Through that time, Coach Paul Webb had left in 1975 and gone down to Old Dominion. So had some interaction with Coach Webb, but Coach Nunley was really, really tough on his players. He had the philosophy that he wanted to make practices harder than game situations would be. And he wanted to make sure that his players were as well prepared as possible for games. A loud, a big personality, loved cigars, and that was at a time he shared an office with Helmut Warner, and the two of them both liked cigars. So as you headed in, and no windows in their office, so you could tell when the two of them were in the office. But Coach Webb had built national success with men's basketball program, and Coach Nunley was able to continue that for 24 seasons.
Oh, so he was here long, yeah.
He was, yeah. And then Helmut Warner was the men's soccer coach and the tennis coach. He was a lot of fun.
And swimming too, I think.
And he did swimming for a while. Yes, he did. Yes, he was a lot of fun. Soccer was not as big in the United States at that time. He had been an All-American at Lynchburg. He really wanted to spread the word about how great the game of soccer was. So it was fascinating being able to talk with him, be able to watch him, coach his players, and they were another group that had a lot of state and regional success. And his personality, he knew all of the coaches, throughout the region. I'm sure he knew a lot of them all over the country, but he was a lot of fun to work with. Greg Waters was an assistant coach with football. He was offensive coordinator, and then he was assistant baseball coach. And then when Coach Stevens retired, he took over as the head coach. He and I were right around the same age, so we became really good friends then. And Greg still lives in Ashland, so we have stayed in touch all through the years. The college had gone co-ed in the mid-'70s, so the women's sports were kind of in their infancy as they were coming through. Rachel Anderson was the first full-time women's coach who came on, so she had tennis. She also oversaw the cheerleading program. And then the first year that I was here, Lynda Lurch was brought in as field hockey, women's basketball, and women's lacrosse head coach, which that's hard to imagine today that somebody would have all three of those. But she had all three, and then from here she went and became the head women's basketball coach up at Cornell. And so she was up there for a while. And then that led to Carol LaHaye coming, and then she had basketball. She also had lacrosse for a bit. I think one season she may have had women's soccer as well. But she came in, and then she's won also. She was similar to Coach Stevens, that she was, kind of that quiet. She would get after the girls in practice or during games if she needed to, but overall her personality was kind of quiet. She was kind of that quiet, effective leadership style. But it was great when I left school, and then times when I would come back, she was one of the staples that was in the department.
Wow, well, that's a wonderful history in a nutshell of all those different people. I was fortunate to interview Ted Keller and Helmut Werner for this Making Memories, obviously, many years ago, and Rachel Anderson and Carol LaHaye. So I've heard a little bit of that, but to get the big snapshot of all of the different sports and the trajectory. Well, when did now I'm not sure if this is even accurate. But when did is it Ray Long? When did he come? Is that not it? Baseball? Or is that, am I getting mixed up?
He was on the team. He was never a head coach.
Oh, he wasn't a coach. Okay.
No,
he was a player.
He was at Patrick Henry High School for a long time.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking. He was at. Okay, he
but
coached there.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We've had a lot of stability amongst the coaches, like for baseball. Yeah. Coach Stevens came in 1949, and we've only had 3 baseball coaches since then because Greg Waters succeeded him, and then Ray Hedrick played for Greg Waters, and then he took over 20 years ago.
Yeah, so Ray Hedrick is the one who's been here so long.
Correct, yes. He's been here for 20 years.
Yeah, that is really great stability for building a program. And if you want to give a shout out to the team for this year, this would be a good time to do it, I guess.
It is, yes. They won their 2nd regional title this past weekend, and we are fortunate that they'll be able to host a super regional series this weekend with Adrian from Michigan. So it's the first time that we've had NCAA baseball on campus. So another big step for the program.
Yeah. And for Randolph-Macon to get this, NCAA attention through the last, I've been here 19 years, but through the last, few years, in the last decade, we've gotten lots of that kind of attention.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate. Jeff Burns is the current athletic director, and he actually was a student of mine when I was here before, and he was on the men's soccer team and was also on the tennis team. I was the faculty advisor for the Theta Chi fraternity, and Jeff was a member of that. So we had a lot of contact while he was in school, and he stayed on campus ever since he graduated, became an assistant coach, a head coach, assistant AD, and now AD.
Yeah.
But he, along with Dennis Canich prior to him, had hired really good people as head coaches. Ray Hedrick and Pedro Aruza have both been here 20 years. I think Kevin Profit and Bill Rogers have both been here a little over 20 years. I think they may have both been 21 years. So we've had some coaches that have had some long tenures. But Jeff has the leadership style of he wants to put good people in their position and then let them do their jobs. And that has been very effective.
Well, those long tenures are so great for building a program. I mean, you think that in coaching, I know in D1, to be able to build a program and you can reap those successes, sometimes it takes a long time. And I know when Coach K retired at Duke a few years ago, he said, if I were starting out today with my record in the early years, I would have been fired. I would never have been able to stay because there's such pressure to perform immediately or have winning seasons immediately, I should say. So it really speaks well for the you can see these programs are successful when they've had some time to build and over time.
And it's great to see, too, when they have those long tenures, they have connections with those players from these past 20 years. And to be able to see those players come back, I'm anticipating that we'll see a lot of former players that'll be in the stands for the baseball this weekend.
Oh, that'll be exciting. Yeah, good. Well, thank you for all of that. I can see how you were excited to go into sports communication, and I would just say, you have a great voice. I mean,
thank you.
So you're public for doing the announcing, and did you want to talk about that? Was that fun for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had fun. And again, growing up, I was always uncomfortable speaking in front of groups. But when I was here, getting some experience and doing the public address, and then I have people saying, well, you do sound really good on the microphone. And part of it, too, the practice of speaking in front of classroom every day. So it's been a lot of fun. Been able to do a lot of PA work, have done a little bit of radio through the years, so have been able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's I would think that would be fun. I'm sure it's a high pressure environment because you've got to be watching what's happening and describing it. But while you're describing what just happened, something else is happening. So I think that's a challenge. I'm sure.
Yes, definitely.
to string together coherent sentences while things are happening so fast. Well, let's talk about, if you'd like, I do want to focus on Randolph-Macon, but your career did have a few interludes. When you left here, you went to University of Richmond.
Well, I actually worked 3 years for the Richmond Braves.
Oh, okay.
Prior to that.
Yeah, okay.
So the Atlanta Braves had their AAA team in Richmond. Growing up, baseball was always my favorite sport, so I thought it would be really fun to be able to work in professional baseball. And initially, my thought was that I was hoping I'd be able to make my way down to Atlanta and work with the major league team, which that didn't happen. But I had a blast. I was 3 years working with the Braves and had some tremendous coworkers. And one of them who I became really good friends with was Bob Black, who did the radio for the Richmond Braves, and then he also did radio for the University of Richmond, and actually still does. So I was with the Braves for 3 years, and then spent 1 year working for an agent, which was a really interesting year. I would not have wanted to do that for a career, but it was really interesting to see that operation. And a lot of what I did was for baseball and football players, when they would come up for salary arbitration, I would take a look at their career stats up until then, compare them to other players, and see where they should fall from a salary point of view. And again, it was a lot of fun. I would not have wanted to do that for a full career. But then a position came at University of Richmond in 1989, and I joined their sports information office. And Richmond was very, very similar to Randolph-Macon in terms of the student body. And it's just their athletics were on a little higher level than Randolph-Macon. So I had a great time while I was there. Some really good people that I worked with from an administrative point of view, and then the coaches, student athletes. I mean, there's still a lot of folks that I made friendships with then that I still have. So I was there for 12 years. And then shortly after that, probably after a couple of years, then I went to VCU for 4 years.
Sports communications still.
Yes, yes. And very different setup there, but really enjoyed it as well. And it was funny when I was at Richmond. There were some of their fans that thought that the VCU players were all thugs, and I got down there. Kids were wonderful. I mean, they were college kids, but they were a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed the time that I was down there. And then after I left there, a friend of mine, Sean Ryan, he and I had started College Baseball Insider website in 2002, which covered Division I college baseball. Sean had played baseball at Richmond, and we had become good friends, stayed in touch when he left, and there was just a real need for some better coverage for Division I college baseball. So we initially thought we were going to do a printed piece, but everybody we talked to said do something with the web. So we ended up shifting to that. So when I left VCU, I was working on that full time, And then position came open at Randolph-Macon in 2013, and Jeff Burns contacted me and asked if I would consider coming back. And when I was here before, the facilities were not as good as they are now. A lot of the alums, I'm sure, will remember the baseball field and the football field overlapped, which the coaches made it work, but it was just a terrible setup for both the sports. So the school had to be able to acquire some land north of campus to be able to separate the two. So they did that with Hugh Stevens Field at Estes Park for the baseball field, and then Day Field, the new version of Day Field,
and reorient
for
it.
football. Yes, had to flip it 90 degrees, but Jeff had the athletic department in a really good place. President Lindgren had the school in a really good place. So it was kind of an easy decision to be able to come back.
It's really transformed the campus. When I first came, it was the old Day Field with the, with the field going east and west, and but now it's beautiful. All of it is beautiful still, and now with Duke Hall, I mean, it really is lovely.
It was really well thought out with Andrews Hall and Birdsong Hall at both ends, and then I mean, nobody had Duke Hall in the plans,
right?
But the building fit perfectly. And it's tremendous that with the opening of Duke Hall, prior to Duke Hall, the fall and spring sports had to share locker rooms. So football team, field hockey, everybody, when they were done with their fall season, they had to clean out their locker rooms so that baseball or lacrosse could use their locker rooms. Now all the teams have their own locker rooms, and I think that's just a huge plus for all of those programs.
Well, that's awesome. Well, the statistics in sports are just, especially baseball. I think of all sports. Baseball fans love statistics, so I guess that really was a natural fit for you to combine those. And with your, college baseball insider. I just want to go back to VCU real quickly. When you were there, you weren't there when they had their big run in basketball. That was
I was not. That was just a little bit before that. I was fortunate. I got to go with them for 2 NCAA tournaments. Jeff Capel was a head coach when I first got there, and we played Wake Forest down in Raleigh, and ended up, I think, lost by 1 to Wake Forest, but a really good game. And VCU had always felt like they needed that one signature win to kind of get them over the hump. So then Anthony Grant came in when Jeff Capel left to go to Oklahoma. Anthony Grant came in, and while he was there, they ended up beating Duke in the first round up in Buffalo. And that was really what springboarded them. So then Anthony Grant left to go to Alabama, and that was when Shaka Smart came in after him, and then he was the one that got them to out to the Final Four.
Yeah, that was very exciting. So then you came back to Randolph-Macon. So Jeff Burns made a good call, get you back, and but meanwhile you are still have your college baseball
insider. Yes. Still do that, and still don't cover it. Don't work on it on a full-time basis, but still keep my hands in on it. Right.
Well, I think you've really given us a great lay of the land of all the sports and the people involved, which I love hearing about, because I've heard those names.
Yep.
Well, some of them, like Jeff Burns, that was still here, but I love that giving us a linear view of athletics at Randolph-Macon from even before your time to the present. Well, what have been some of your favorite things to highlight? I guess it's easy to highlight all the wins and successes, but have there been times when you've had tough things to report or communicate?
We did. In 1981, it was my first year as sports information director, and Coach Stevens announced that he was going to retire. President Payne wanted to make a big splash with the new athletic director hire, and there were 3 external candidates and 2 internal candidates. Coach Keller and Coach Werner were the internal candidates. And so there was no hint of who was going to be the athletic director. And we got really good coverage from the TVs. At that time, all 3 TV stations had sports departments. We had 2 newspapers, so everybody was very interested, and they were trying to find out who it was. At the Holiday Inn, that's usually where people would stay when they would come on campus. So they reserved rooms in the names of all 3 of the outside candidates. So we had a press conference scheduled for morning, and Jan Stocker from Wisconsin was introduced as the athletic director, and she would have been the first female athletic director in the state. So it was interesting dealing with everything with the press conference and all. Shortly after she had accepted the position, she withdrew her acceptance. And so they had to scramble, and so they went out and found Ted Keller on a golf course and asked him if he would become athletic director. But I remember in setting up the press conferences, I was kind of relying on the school's communication department, and Lex McMillan was the PR director at that time. And so we had put, I think, a midnight announcement for the athletic director with thought that the paper would have it in the morning. Well, remember Channel 12, Bill King from Channel 12 was very upset with that he didn't have a chance to have it on the 11 o'clock news, that the paper had it. So that was really difficult to deal with. But it was a great learning experience on dealing with the media.
I've seen press releases in the archives, just in different folders, and they'll have, for immediate release or for, the date, press release. So how did you, just logistically, did you communicate those things to the media? Did you, you didn't, I guess you had fax machines, but you didn't have, you didn't have the internet, but how did you physically do this?
We had, I can't even remember what the machines were called, but it would be a long cylindrical tube, and you would attach the sheet to it. And
the mimeograph thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not mimeograph, but it would be one that it would go across the phone line.
Okay, so what was the early fax, I guess?
Yes.
It was the early fax. Yeah.
So it would just kind of go line by line, and then it would print.
Like a teletype almost.
Yeah. So we would send that. A lot of it we ended up, we would do by phone.
Yeah.
And you would dictate. We still, in the early 80s, we would mail out weekly releases through the U.S. mail for people to get stats and notes, things like that. But usually, if you had something that was coming out pretty quickly, you would just call the media outlets and give it to them.
You just read it over like you see.
Exactly.
Read it over the phone. Yeah.
Exactly, and we would do that after games. We would send the box score to Associated Press, and then we would send it to the Richmond Times-Dispatch. But then a lot of times, if the Times-Dispatch was close to deadline, we would just dictate it over the phone.
Yeah. A lot of high pressure, especially games, and they want to get it on the news, and and you've got to. The score is one thing, but if you've got to write something really quickly, especially if a game is tight, you can't. I'm sure you really got to write very quickly, or have something in your head that whichever way this goes, I know how I'm going to headline it.
Yeah. Now we didn't write the game stories as much back then because we didn't have the web to put them on. The media wanted to be able to write their own stories, so. Okay. If we had, we would usually have writers from the newspapers that would be at football and basketball games. A lot of the times, for a lot of the other sports, they might just take a score. If it was a big game, if soccer was playing Virginia or something like that, then they might take a little bit more details in terms of who scored
plays,
the goals,
yeah.
things like that. So it kind of varied from sport to sport.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, what have been some of the most memorable or pleasurable things to report on or communicate during your time?
Well, the basketball national championship in 2022 was definitely the highlight.
Yeah.
When I was here in the early 80s, it was really hard to imagine that any team would have themselves in a position to play for a national championship. The 1984 football team was really, really strong, and back then there were no automatic qualifiers, so they just had 8 teams from around the country that were in the playoffs. So had we won that first round game, we were ahead in the after 3 quarters and gave up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to lose by 1. But we would have gone to the semifinals, and at that point you didn't know as much about the other schools around the country. You knew schools that were in the area, in the state, within the conference. And then some of the other ones, especially ones that we would play non-conference, Salisbury and some of the other programs. But as we got more into the 2000, now basketball always had shots. In 77, they had played for a national championship. They made a lot of playoff trips, and then women's basketball too got to the national championship game. So I think there were programs that felt like they had a chance to be able to win a national championship. But I think now, as we got into the 2000s, and especially with the improvement of facilities, softball went to a World Series, baseball went to a World Series. Football made their run to the semifinals last year, and then men's basketball, kind of finishing it off. And we used to talk about, we try to guess which program was going to be the first one to win a national championship. So I think when men's basketball did do that, then I think that gave a lot of the other coaches the thought that, hey, we can do it here.
Yeah.
But that was definitely the highlight. But there have been a lot of big conference championships, a lot of big NCAA wins that a lot of the programs have had, and it's been a lot of fun. It adds work to us, but a lot of the teams have been able to host NCAA games. We've had men's and women's basketball. We've had softball. We've had football and baseball. All of them within recent years have been able to host NCAA events. So that's great. One, to speak to the fact that we've got facilities that are strong enough that the NCAA feels comfortable in getting games there, but then that the teams are strong enough as well to be able to earn those home games.
Well, that's great. So those are really some great highlights. What have been some of the biggest challenges facing RMC sports or D3 athletics, you think, going forward?
Fundraising. That's probably the biggest thing, which I'm sure a lot of academic departments would say that. We have 18 varsity sports right now. All of them want to have success, and it's challenging for them to not only get. We're fortunate that the ODAC, the Old Dominion Athletic Conference, is strong in a lot of sports, but to be able to play strong opponents outside of the conference, so that involves travel. I think the the coaches have expanded their territories for recruiting, where they used to look heavy within the state. I think they're spreading that out to where they're looking at North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a lot of states through the Mid-Atlantic, and even we'll get some kids that'll come in from Florida or Texas, states that are a little bit farther. But I think I think you always want to improve on the facilities. Mm-hmm. As nice as the baseball field is, there's going to be other schools that are going to improve their baseball facilities. So Duke Hall was a huge step for a lot of the sports, and be able to have nice, big, spacious locker rooms. Football to have a large meeting room that they can get the whole team in. Just things like that. I think just kind of overall, just the finances. But we're really fortunate that the school has great support. The alumni, high percentage of them have really good experiences at Randolph-Macon, both from an athletic point of view as well as academic and social. So we've been fortunate to have very, very generous donors to be able to give back to the programs. It's been a little easier for the men's sports in that the school, it was all male for so long. But now the women's programs will be coming up on the 50th women's basketball team next season. There's more support from the female alumni as well as the men. So you're getting good support for the women's athletic programs as well as for the men's.
Good. Well, fundraising or funding in general is the biggest challenge, I guess, in most places.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, do you have a favorite story or anecdote about an RMC coach or athletics or any funny thing that happened or poignant? It doesn't have to be funny, but any.
I'll have to think. There've been so many good ones. One of the funniest things that I ever had seen. There was a football player named Pete Popek who was a lineman. He just was a really funny guy, tough football player, but he really struggled to get through school. And I think it may have been his 6th year that he finally graduated. But at that time, graduation was in Crenshaw Gym. So as he was walking across the stage to get his diploma, he kissed President Payne on the lips. And the whole place just roared. But he was so happy, so proud that he had gotten his diploma. And anytime a graduation comes around, that is one of the first things that I think of. Yeah. Trying to think of some other ones with games. I can't really think of anything real out of the ordinary.
Oh, that's fine. I just didn't know if you had anything about a particular coach or, athletic director. I've heard a couple of funny things about, just interesting about Coach Stevens and, different things I didn't know. Not to put you on the spot. Well, what has been the best thing about working in communications at RMC? Let you go.
One thing that is fortunate with our department and with the athletic training office, we really get to deal with all of the teams versus just, where coaches are primarily dealing with their one sport. We really get to deal with all of the coaches, all of the student athletes, and we always will divide up responsibilities as to who is the primary contact for a sport. But with Division III, you're really concentrating on your home events. So you do get to to work with all of the teams. You get interaction with all of the coaches. So I think being able to work with them, get everything that they want on the web, and they look at the website as being a recruiting tool as well. So we want to make sure that the information is there that they want to have for recruiting. And then we do have contact with a lot of different departments on campus. We have a lot of direct contact with physical plant, and they are tremendous in helping us, and especially when we have tournament games, whether it's conference tournament, NCAA tournaments that aren't quite expected. And this week being a perfect example with graduation being on Sunday, we've got a lot of needs that we have for NCAA baseball, but all of the staff that we have dealt with through the years from physical plant have been so good that they have been, cooperative, have a really good attitude in helping us out. And then, we have interactions with the business office, with the president's office, with admissions, and just with so many different areas of campus. I think, just being able to have that contact with so many different parts of campus that, we don't feel like, we're just athletic communications, that we're just kind of in our bubble by ourselves. But we're working with all the athletic department and so much of the overall campus.
Yeah, that is, I can see how athletics really would touch on so many departments and, like you say, offices across campus. And it's great to hear the cooperation. And I can see that, the college community is proud when a sports team is going to host an event, even though it is generating more work. But there's a sense of pride in that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a sense of pride locally, within Ashland, Richmond, Central Virginia area, but then also within the alumni community, but then also nationally too. Out of all the Division III schools in the country, we were the only ones to have hosted and won a playoff game for football, men's basketball, and baseball through this past year. And there's more than 430 schools that have men's basketball. Not all of them have baseball and football, but out of all the schools in the country, we were the only ones. So there's a lot of national pride as well to be able to host and have success.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we'll have to cut that clip out, what you just said, and post that on the website. That's awesome. Well, I do want to just state for the record that next month you will be awarded the 25-year award by the College Sports Communicators for 25 years of service in the athletics communications profession. This award will be presented at the 2024 College Sports Communication Convention in Las Vegas. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to that. That will be fun to see some folks that I had worked with in the past on the Division I level when I was at Richmond and at VCU. And then a lot of them that I have worked with over the last 11 years at Division III schools. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Good. And a nice trip to Las Vegas. That sounds fun.
Yes.
Yeah. And I also just going to brag on you just a little bit because you got to do the talking, but I'm going to say this was from Coach Jeff Burns about your honor, your award. This honor is a testament to the years of consistent dedication, professionalism, and leadership that Phil has provided the industry. His value to Randolph-Macon, our coaches, players, and fan base is unmatched within our community. He's an unsung hero in our department, a first-class professional and better person. So, me too.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
That's right. Well, any final thoughts or?
I did think of one funny story that I can throw in, and this involved Coach Nunley, and he was one that, like I say, during practices he would try to be, really serious. Guys aren't messing around at all. So on day of games, we would always have a walkthrough or a shoot around where the guys would get familiar. When we would go on the road, guys would get familiar with the facilities. And so we were up at Mount St. Mary's, who was a big rival of ours through the late 70s, early 80s. And we were playing in a tournament up there. And so this was before the second game. So the guys were, I think, shooting free throws, and Coach Nunley was over on the side, and he sat on a table, and the table broke, and he fell to the floor. And so everybody stopped. Everybody wanted to laugh, but they, weren't sure that was appropriate. So Coach Nunley started laughing, and then the whole place just broke up.
Good. I guess they want to laugh at you. Also want to make sure he's okay before the game. So yeah, that really broke the tension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, from the little bit I've heard through the years about Coach Nunley, that doesn't sound like a typical pregame routine. So that is
definitely was not.
Yeah. Well, Phil Stanton, I want to thank you so much for coming to Making Memories today, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Well, thank you, Lynda. I have enjoyed it very much. It's Randolph-Macon is really a special place. There have been some great people that have come through as students, faculty, staff, coaches, administrators, and it's been a lot of fun to work with them.
Well, all the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.